So we gave you worksheets that are tools. It is not the be-all and end-all of what you need to do to pull your program performance measurements together. So we really need to review this again. We gave you the worksheet that just sets out the high level, what is your program, what is its goal, that longer-term end result that your program's contributing to, what are your important activities. Not all the activities, but those important activities that are important to measure. Who are your customers, and then who are your indirect customers and stakeholders of that program. So basically we gave you fill out that one worksheet. Last session we gave you the performance measurement worksheet and said focus on working through one activity. And so the point that I want to communicate is that you can use these worksheets to think through measures for every activity in your program. So you're not one and done. If you think through one activity and think you have all the measures you need, that is not the case. So continue to use these worksheets to work through all the different activities, important activities of your program. Once you have done that, then you have a picture of your program and a picture of measurements across the program, and then you can pick and look at, well, which ones are the most important to work on to improve, which ones are the most important that reflect really how well my program is doing or not, which are the most important measures to communicate to stakeholders. From there, it goes into one data collection plan. So we are not proposing that you have multiple data collection plans. And I know there's many programs out there that gather data in a lot of different places, but we encourage you to try to bring it together into one picture of performance, and however that works for you. So does that make sense how those worksheets are to be used? The performance measurement worksheet we gave you is not a replacement for an evaluation plan or a logic model. It's simply a tool to help you think through how to measure. Questions with that? Okay. So here is an example. I wanted to give you a real example from the data center. So in the data center, we do use a logic model. Don't let that term hang you up. The first session, we talked about the results chain. It's the same thing. And so on the left of the screen, you see the results chain of the data center. We provide training, we provide data, we provide technical assistance in the hopes that you'll be more informed, you can make better decisions about your programs, and therefore, ultimately, we feel like we're contributing to the health of the community. So it's the results chain of the data center. And we've spent a lot of time thinking about where does our responsibility end, and you can see that, is the data center responsible for improving obesity rates in the community? Our work is really indirectly tied to that, but we contribute through providing you with the tools and resources. And so anyway, results chain on the left, and on the right is our performance measures, and we are the data center, and we look at lots of data. Don't use me as an example. I tend to look at more than I need to, but what we've done is we pulled all that data together into one master data collection sheet, and we've started to track it. So over time, I'm going to be able to look at where's our data requests. Are they declining? Are they increasing? What division's really driving the bulk of our requests? How many are coming from the community? So we'll be able to look at that information and revise our programming and our staffing workload as necessary. So this is just an example, just to communicate that one-stop look of your program that is ultimately what you want to work towards. If you're not there yet, no problem, no worries. Start with the 3 key measures, but continue to work towards building a more comprehensive look. So the measurement tips, measure what's important. So I gave the example last time of when I took over the data center and the logic model, we were trying to track the number of data sharing agreements that we had in place. Well, we only do those when we need the data. So does it mean anything if I can report that I had a 100% success rate in completing one data sharing agreement in the year? So measure what's important, and with that is also measure what's important to your staff. What would be meaningful to the team of people you're working on? Balance, get a rounded picture of your program. So there's several meanings with this. You don't want to focus on just one activity and measure the results of that one activity. You want to pick measurements that look at a variety of activities in your program. The other concept is you don't want to just measure widgets, those outputs, like number of trainings conducted. You want to also measure some of the results. What's changed because you did the work? So think about rounding out that picture. But less is more. You don't need to measure everything in the world, so you really want to focus your work on what is meaningful to you, your staff, stakeholders, your team. What do you do with the data? you use it, right? If you're not using that information to drive changes or improvement, then it's completely worthless. So use that information to drive change and improvement. And then remember, same with QI. I really talk that if you invest in the time to learn the QI methods and tools up front, it makes your job easier down the road. But it does take a commitment of energy. So once you invest in the time to learn these skills and tools and how to measure, it becomes easier and easier and easier. Okay, do not measure only those events or milestones, so the data sharing agreement. Don't measure those things that are one and done. We produced a media campaign. Well, then what? So you need to measure your impressions. So again, you don't want to measure those things that are really infrequently calculated because it's not going to give you enough information to make change in a quick enough manner. Okay. Only use measures that are data, not information. So how many people collect data just for the sake of collecting data, but then it's not useful for anything? So that's the concept there. How are we feeling with those concepts? And let me get some feedback of how it went last session, if people have been able to think about measures and work some more on it, or how many people feel like they have at least one solid measure that they can actually put into place and start using?
Question.
Yeah.
Table mic.
This thing on?
Yep.
For my important activities in the communications, on the communications team, I have things like media, print, interactive web facilitation. Is that the level that I want to be at?
Those aren't measures. Those are things that you're measuring, but those aren't actually the measurements themselves.
So those are the important activities, though. That would be the right way to say that. Okay, yeah. And then how do I translate that into measures then?
So I don't have that slide up, but if you think about what does a measure look like, you need to have like a percent, an average. It's a number.
Okay, so this sheet then.
You need to translate that into a number.
This guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's what we did last time.
Number of web hits, average web hits per month over time for whatever you're trying to promote.
Right.
Those kinds of things. So you have to have a number.
So you need to do this sheet before you do this sheet.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Everybody get that? You have to figure out your measures and then you put it in your data collection plan. Other questions, comments, struggles? We get this doesn't come easy for some people. We live and breathe this in the data center, so it's a lot easier for us. But just keep trying, and don't be afraid to ask for help. There's a lot of resources available to you through the Quality Council, through the data center. Going once, going twice. Okay. Is this me still? Mm-hmm. Okay. So what are we going to do today? Today we're going to continue to build on what the worksheets that you've completed over the last couple sessions. So what do we do once we've done all that data collection? Then what do we do with it? So we're going to talk briefly about how you can look at it, how you select some opportunities to move forward on, and then how it relates to the quality improvement and the workshop we did last year. So we're going to deliberately link these. So the only piece of the workshop today is going to be working on SMART objectives. Should go pretty quick. I think we have worksheets in your packets. And other than that, if we get out early, we're just going to hang around and be available to ask or answer questions and to provide some technical assistance. So it's been on a journey. We've done goals, customers, last 2 weeks measures. We're going to move on to objectives, results, reporting out, and then starting your quality improvement opportunities, which is my personal favorite. So a word about this, though, is that this is not a perfectly linear process. So how many people were in the co-op last year? We kind of gave you the improvement method, and I hopefully communicated that it's not always perfectly linear. You often repeat steps, and that's totally okay. So just be prepared for that. So what we're going to talk about is developing objectives and looking at those results. So the outcome that we're hoping is that you're going to be able to write at least one SMART objective for your program walking out today, knowing that you might have to fake the data until you get the data, which is okay. So word to the wise, not always linear. Sometimes in a program, say you have a grant that you're working on, your goals and objectives are often handed to you. I like to think of those as achievement goals and objectives. So knowing at the gate when you set up a program activity, you're knowing that you want to achieve a certain level of performance or results. And so sometimes your objectives, you know them and you write them right after your goal statement, okay? But for the sake of this presentation, I want to show how building your measurements into objectives makes them easier to write. So we're going to skip objectives and go first to analyzing results, and then we're going to jump back to objectives. Is that crazy, or can people hang with me there? Okay. Okay. So let's look at analyzing results. So how can you tell if your program working? So first, you're going to reflect on your current baseline performance measure results. So in the data collection plan, so by this time, hopefully you have a start at how you're going to collect this data. You have your program measure listed. You have the data source you're going to use or the tool you're going to use to gather that information. You've assigned responsibility, because if you don't, it ain't going to get done, right? And then you're going to collect that data and input it. And so the first column will be your baseline or your initial results if you've never collected the data before. Then what are you going to do? Well, you're going to look at it and provide some thinking to it. What are the questions you're going to ask? We talked about the 3 kinds of performance measures. How much did you do? How well did you do it? Is anybody better off? So simply ask, did you do as much as you wanted to or thought you'd do? Did you do it as well as your customers needed you to do? And have their lives change for the better? So those measures directly tie into how you're going to actually question your results. Then, eventually, you're going to start comparing those results against something. You can compare them to yourself over time or your program performance over time. That's direct measurement. In 2012, we did this. In 2013, we did this. 2014, so over time. To others, peer benchmarking. So the data center, one of our peers, friends of mine, but also kind of competitors because they do really good work and I want to do it as well or better than them, is Tacoma Pierce County Public Health Department. They have a really great data center. So I would benchmark myself to some of the work that they do. Industry standards. Sometimes those standards are just part of general practice, and I'm sure there's a lot of industry standards in, say, nursing practice. Communicable disease EPI, so there's standards of how long it should take to start an investigation of a communicable disease. Those aren't generated by a peer, they're not generated by us over time. WAC says you'll do it in 3 days, and that becomes the standard against which you're going to measure your performance. Eventually, you're going to establish an improvement target. That's simply how much improvement do you want? What are you hoping to achieve over time? So let's use that example, coming back to the household example. So Wenzel household, if you remember, the overall goal was quality of life for me and my family. We prepare meals, we clean the house, complete house repairs, maintain the yard. My family, my children, are my customers. I worked out some performance measures and shared those. I put them into a data collection plan, and I began to collect data. And this shows you that the percent of meals served on time was one of my measures of quality and process, was only 55%. And so I'm going to reflect on that with my family and say, well, is that good enough for our family or not, and why not? And maybe we'll think about, well, we're not actually having our meals on time, and what that means is we're rushed through our meals. We're not having time to communicate. Me and my husband aren't having time to talk with our children about what's happening in their day and to encourage them. And so you can see that there could be a longer-term impact to the quality of life if we don't intervene and make family mealtime more of a priority. So I know this is kind of a silly example, but that's how you're going to look at that information. You could do as simple as, let's talk about it with our team and find out if that's acceptable or not and if we need to do something. So after discussing that concept with my family, we're saying, no, that's not good enough. It's really bleeding into quality family time. My kids don't feel like they're getting enough attention from mommy. My son's acting out in school. True story. So I need to spend some more time talking about the importance of school and reflecting on their day. So our target now is going to be 80%, and we're going to continue to measure until we at least hit that 80%. Remember, the thing about a target is it's not all that you'll ever achieve, not one and done. Well, we hit 80, we can't do any better. That's not the case. That's for a given improvement cycle. So if we go and hit 80%, then we're going to work towards 90%, and we're going to be working towards 95%. Okay, so it's not one and done. It's a continuous process. Okay, so from the review of your performance data, what might you learn? Torney. Oh, here we go. Torney.
So my question related to the Charlie Brown piece is, when you want to change history, when you want public health to make a difference, how do you evaluate that ongoing history of not learning to trying to create change?
I don't know. Data. Right? So what, Sue?
As a risk-taking.
Risk-taking. Yeah.
But clearly,
Innovation.
all of the data showed that what he was trying to do didn't work.
Right.
So what can we learn from the data that says, here's a better tact or here's a different direction? How do we go about
Right.
measuring that?
And again, I would say that what the course that we're teaching is monitoring performance data would tell you that something needs to change. It wouldn't tell you why or how, right? Those are different methods. And so if you really need to understand the why things are not working, you know, the performance data and what we expect all of you to be able to do is to look at your data and monitor performance all the time and to identify when something's not working well or needs to be changed. That's going to cue you into, well, why isn't it working? That might be a cue, and we're going to talk about later what to do with the results, to do a further investigation, to do a full-blown evaluation study, which would help you identify why it's not working and what are the potential ways to make it improve. So performance data is really a cue to act, not necessarily the be-all and end-all. It's the first step, what I would say. And so then you go to the other methods we're going to talk about. Evidence-based practice research, fuller evaluation, right? Innovation management. Those are other techniques and methods. So you might find activities that you need to just get rid of because they're not working. And when we teach this with Linda, she talks about how earlier in the days of public health and health promotion, they used to do health fairs and present information. And over time, realizing that's just not an effective use of resources and you don't have a whole lot of bang for your buck. Eliminating those kinds of activities. You might find you need to be doing more of something. You might find that your data sucks and you just need to continue and improve because it's not that reliable. And that's a valid finding. That's good information. You might find that the logic just doesn't make sense. I think last week, his name's Mike. Was Mike? Yeah. Was talking about how his activity and the end result just didn't seem aligned. And he was really kind of confused by that. Well, that's a valid perspective to kind of think through. You might find that what you're doing is not going to be logically related to what you thought it would be. You have to change course. So,
And the things that you are measuring are the templates, and you have a goal. Do you ever have columns for barriers and then contingency plan? If this is not working, identify why in a column, and then what are we going to do to get it back on track?
yeah, we have, you could certainly put that into the same data collection plan. If that's what works for you, I'd say go for it. That's a great way to document. We have a tool that we're going to give you later that would pull it all together as well. It's not a mandatory tool, so do what works for you. I've seen people that have their logic model with their analysis in it and their conclusions. So that's fine. We're not going to give you that template today, but it would be a simple matter of adding on to the data collection. Yep. And then from that, we might identify specific QI or QM projects. And I'm going to go into a little bit about definitions of how I use those terms and how we need to be thinking about them. And then again, kind of related to what Torney says, well, how does it tell you what to do different and how to do different and to innovate? Program performance checking is not going to do that. It's what you do next with the information. So one of the things you might find is, well, we just don't have enough information, so I'm going to call in the data center to do a fuller evaluation or a research project around it. And that's fine too. Those are all valid conclusions. Okay, so once you look at results, then you're going to back up and say, what are we going to do with those results? So I identified the need in my family to improve the percentage of meal times that are on time together from 55 to 80%. I'm going to develop an objective statement around that. Did you want to take over here or you want me to go?
Keep going for a bit.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so what are objectives? So thinking about the goal statement, the goals are your end desired results, those big picture results you're working for. Objectives then are just the nearer results of what you're trying to achieve, and then you can write them in a way that makes them smart and can help you focus attention. So your objectives are always directly tied to your data, and your data is tied to the results that you map out that you want. Objectives should be smart. Everybody's heard the term SMART? Okay? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound. There's some different versions out there, which is fine. So remember, again, objectives are linked to results. So if you think about the example of the meals that I provide to my children, you can see that as a result of this, I expect that my children are going to grow healthy. That's logical, right? And then by doing these, providing meals, my family will have an opportunity to eat meals together every day. And by doing that, we have the opportunity to discuss the importance of school and other things going on in their lives. And by doing that, children can stay out of trouble, and children go to college, and it's all quality of life. So they're linked, in my head, in a way that's logical and results chain. So each one of these things is then measurable, potentially. Number of meals provided per month is an output measure. Easy, right? Percentage of meals served within 10 minutes. That's a direct measure of this activity, of how well we're doing it. And that's a process measure. So that was another performance measure. How do I measure these? Children healthy, family eating together, percent of meals eaten together, percent of children with acceptable BMI ranges. So for each of these, I can build out a measure, right? And so here are the results, the measures, and then those measures then just count those results. And so they're all tied together. So your results are tied to your measures, and then your measures get tied to your objectives. So there's always some confusions about the different levels of goal and objective, so we're putting it here. The goal statements are the really general statements. Improve quality of life. That's pretty vague. They can be measurable, though, and we measure those with population health indicators. If you were here for the first session, I gave the example of child abuse. That's a big so what in the community, a big public health outcome. You can measure that through the population health indicator of rates of child abuse. Objective statements are more closely tied to the work that you can claim responsibility for. So they're tied to the before the end results. And they get more specific, a lot more specific. So goals, general, objectives, more specific. These are measured with your program performance measures. That's the work of this class. So establishing common ground in simple language, just think of the objective as a SMART before the end result or activity that you're wanting to improve and work on. So in this example, I'm going to select the percentage of meals being served on time as my improvement objective for the year. So, and then in turn, I'm going to develop that into a SMART objective.
Here, you need this. I'll swap with you.
Okay.
So let's real quickly run through the formula for SMART objectives. And Stacey has this mapped out real nicely. So here's a SMART objective for the Winslow household. Increase the percentage of meals served within 10 minutes of scheduled meal time from 55% per week to 80% per week by January 15th of 2016. So let's break it down. So the first thing that a SMART objective needs is a verb and the direction of good. So which way do you want it to go? And in this case, increase. So Stacey's wanting to increase the percentage of meals. Sometimes it's reduce, sometimes it's decrease. And then you've got your SMART objective performance measure in there. And the performance measure, she's got underlined the percentage of meals served within 10 minutes of the scheduled meal time. So that's what you're going to be measuring. And then the baseline. So where did you start? And if you didn't have a baseline, if you're developing new performance measures for your program, then you could use your current, or you could use your first measure. If you have a baseline, that's where you're going to want to put it. So they're starting at 55% per week. And then what's the target? What are they going to? And as Stacey mentioned, they're going to be shooting for 80% per week for now, for this improvement cycle. But then they may be increasing that later. So they may be increasing their target to 90%, to 95%. The last part of the formula then is the time frame, because you have to know when you're going to remeasure. So what is the end part of your improvement cycle? So those are the components for a SMART objective. So knowing that, let's critique this SMART objective. Comments? Does it have all of the parts of the formula? What are some comments? Doesn't have a baseline. No baseline. Kind of. Go ahead. Oh, not time bound? It's not time bound? Multiple objectives. So in here, there are two different things. Parents who use positive parenting, and then parents who communicate with their doctors. So might you be wise to split those into two different SMART objectives? Yes. Okay, what else? Not time bound. Okay, so for extra credit here, what question does this answer? What question would this answer? How much do we do? How well did we do it? Is anyone better off? How much do we do? Right, how much do we do? Anything else you want to add on that? Okay. So do we want to take a minute here and practice on SMART objectives? So let's use our dream job of the season for a second, and let's use Santa. So what might be a SMART objective for Santa? Let's go back to the formula. What might be a good SMART objective for Santa?
How many presents you can
So which direction would he want to go? Would he want to deliver more presents? Okay, so increase the number of presents that he's delivering. Torny?
Before sunrise.
Before sunrise. Before sunrise. From, say, 98% to 100%. Boom. Okay? All right.
Or we could make that a public health equity objective, like children, neighborhood.
Nice.
Would you please repeat that in your
Nice.
microphone? I think you should, yeah.
I was just saying that we could turn that into more of an equity statement around which children and in which neighborhoods and, by when and quality of the gift,
Quality of the
investment in their lives,
Good. Awesome. Okay. So how do I pick objectives? How do I pick objectives? Why do I have to have objectives? How many should I have? And where do I start? Anybody have those questions? Well, Stacey's here to answer those.
Okay, first, why do we pick objectives? So anybody ever tried to lose weight? Maybe I'm the only one. So how effective is it if I'm just, I think I might lose 5 pounds in the first quarter, versus if I actually set up, this is psychological, there's proof in social research that this helps. What if I put in my mirror, I'm going to decrease the percentage of my body fat from to by, and then every day it's right there in front of me, and then I tell Steve all about the diet that I'm going to try. And pet peeve, he hates hearing about diets. So again, if I pronounce it, then what's the likelihood that I'm going to be more focused on it, right? And that I'll also get positive encouragement. And maybe I'll get other people helping me to focus on that objective. So there's some psychological merit of establishing objectives. And FAB also says we have to, okay? So if nothing else, you gotta. So why do you have to have them? You do it so you can actually focus your improvement opportunities on something that you can communicate broadly. It helps you focus. How many? Well, here's the facilitator's favorite answer. It depends, right? But that's the truth. It just depends. It depends on what you're doing across your program, how much energy you have towards it. You can have some improvement objectives, but you maybe only be able to focus an actual improvement project on an objective at a time. So it really just depends. There's no right or wrong. Where do you start? I would encourage that you start with those headline measures. We've had the discussions about what those headline measures represent. Somebody report it back. What are headline measures for your program?
We were accredited.
That's certainly a headline measure. Why is that important?
Because it meant that we met national standards for public health.
Mm-hmm. Who might that matter to?
The public.
The public. Board, stakeholders, funders. That's a headline measure because it's important, right? And by improving it, we can actually improve our organization. So it's important. So your headline measures are those that you think really capture the work of your program, that really provide some perspective about how well your program is or isn't working, that are important to communicate to stakeholders, and that would be important to improve if you're not performing well on them. Headline measures. So if you don't know where to start, take a look at your data and see if it's sufficient, if your performance is sufficient around your headline measures. If it's not, start there. Because by doing that, you're saying you're starting on the most important place, right? You've already done the work of identifying what those important measures are. If you're golden on those, me and my family are hitting 99% of our meals together, then I'm going to move on to a secondary measure, maybe working on the adult obesity rate in my household or whatever, right? So headline measures, then you move to those secondary measures. Those are all the other measures that you use for your program. And once those are good, then what can you do? You can go on to pain points. So those are just those things that just drive you nuts about your program, that continuously frustrate you, that provide an opportunity for improvement. So I just call those pain points. Okay, so at this point in time, we're going to take an exercise break to work on a SMART objective. So you have some examples in a handout and some opportunity at the bottom for the work. And the formula is always already written there. So take a look at the first 3 examples and then practice writing 1 or 2 based on the performance measures you developed from the last session. So it should be drawing on the work you did on your last session. So again, the formula, what is the direction of good? Then you add the performance measure. That's very specific. It's a number. What's your baseline number? Make it up if you don't have it right now. Replace it later. Identify what a target number would be for improvement and what would be a reasonable time frame. Okay, and we'll do that for about 10 minutes and then check in. Did everybody get practice? Yeah? All right, so let's regroup and do a little share out. I asked Rhonda to share out her measure. I think she did a great job, so I'd like her to have the opportunity to show you guys how awesome she is.
So, Stacey helped me with this.
I didn't. I just confirmed it.
So, mine was increase the percentage of foster families who complete all of the workshops that I do, and then maybe 50% of the support groups who report use of trauma-sensitive parenting skills from a baseline percent, which I don't know yet, to my target by July 2016. And I think once I have the baseline, I'll be able to figure out my target.
Yep. It's excellent. And she went so far as to already be thinking about the instrument, the tool she needs, and how it relates to the data collection plan. So I didn't help her. I just said, yeah, awesome. So good job, Rhonda. Thank you. Who else wants to share? Share your measure and or share any aha thinking.
Okay, so for those of you that don't know, the food safety program is one of the programs that can actually charge for services provided. We try and get 100% cost recovery. We have been requested or required to reduce our costs for permitting of temporary food establishments. So our SMART objective is to decrease the amount of time spent on the temporary food establishments overall, so that we go from 83% cost recovery to 100% cost recovery. Joni's like, okay, and we have to say we can't increase our fees. And then John had to throw in that we can't compromise food safety either in that process. So by the end of next year.
Comments? Opportunities for improvement?
So what is it that you're doing? I mean, the first part of that?
Okay, so we track the amount of time we spend processing, application, permitting, inspecting. So we need to decrease our time spent doing those activities so that we get 100% cost recovery. Well, we have different amount of times and different permit fees based on the type of food establishment. So overall, right now we're at 83% cost recovery, and we want to go to 100%, well, as close to 100% cost recovery without making a profit. So decreasing time overall.
In talking to Natalie and Julie, we talked about sometimes you need to actually go through, you kind of know what you want to measure, and then you actually need to develop your survey instrument or your data collection method, and then go back and refine it to get more specific. So again, it's never a one and done, it's an iterative process, and that's totally normal and good. Yeah. Anybody else want to share? We're all smart? Okay, so now where are we at? Now we've done all those things, we've analyzed our results, we've established an objective moving forward. Now we're going to report how awesome we are to our stakeholders, to each other, to our board, etc. Is this me or you?
No, this is just introduced. I'll go through it in detail.
Okay. So what we have prepared for you today, I sound like that's what they say on Top Chef. I've prepared for you today. Anybody watch that show? Okay. We've prepared a one-page overview of your program performance that should be able to help you meet FAB standards. One document, it meets from our test of it, and we challenge our accreditation team to back us up with a review of this, but it should be sufficient in meeting pretty much the documentation for Domain 9. So historically, the agency has always had the concept of a QI project storyboard. It's a way to report out your QI project, the details, what you learned, how things improved or not, and capture it in kind of a one page. This is the same concept, but the scope is much bigger. It's about your program perspective. So we're going to be going in this in detail. So remember from the first session, there's kind of 3 ways that you can share your program with stakeholders. One, most important, data, right? We've been talking about that. We haven't so much talked about the other one, but the other one is accomplishments. Those things that you don't need to count, but that are a pretty big deal that you want to report out on. And then stories are the powerful motivators for people who are moved more by the human connections than they are by the numbers. So those 3 components, and there's space in this document for you to wrap and weave those things up. And what we'd like to see is that, obviously we can't produce these in this learning co-op today, but as we start with looking at our last year's data, is be prepared to write this up and present it at a share out in March. And so this will be an opportunity for us to communicate our programs in a page to people and how well we're doing and what we learned. So you should have a copy of that in your handout, and Julie will be going over it in more detail. So later. Okay. So we'll be going over that in detail later. Okay, so the next objective we're going to be doing is linking your result of your program monitoring, aka program evaluation, light, it's your performance data, to a specific improvement opportunity. Okay, so this is where we're linking or bridging to last year's co-op. So we're at the prequel part. So you might think, okay, so I've done all these steps, the goal, the customers, the measures, the results, objectives, opportunities. Now what does it mean to diagnose a project, and then what? So last year, these steps just bleed right into each other. So there's the next method, right? It's the constant series of steps and a method to get you where you want to go. So your SMART objective then becomes the focus of your improvement opportunity, right? So you've just done all this work, you've identified your headline measures, you've tracked your data, you've looked at it, you've made a determination whether you're underperforming or not, and you said, okay, we're going to make an improvement target out of this measure, and we've written a SMART objective and we've declared it to the world. Now enter the improvement cycle. So that becomes your improvement opportunity. To move it forward, you need to diagnose what kind of project that you have. So some people have written SMART objectives for an output or a process measure or an outcome. There's different approaches that you need to take based on what you learn. So Torney kind of alluded this with his questions. How does it tell you what you need to do different or what went wrong? It doesn't. So one project might be to do a fuller evaluation or a research study if you're just not sure if your program results are working or not, if you want some more ammunition. You might identify a very specific opportunity to improve a process. In my world, process improvement is quality improvement. So for people like me, when you say quality improvement, it means something very specific. It means you're improving a process. Quality improvement's a global term, right? All this is quality, but quality improvement means something very specific to some people, so just be aware of that. That might be one opportunity. But from there, what you're going to do, you've assessed your opportunity, you've identified your SMART objectives, that's the launch into your QI project. And there's a bunch of different methods that'll take you there, and starting with further diagnosing what you're trying to accomplish.
Stacey, along with my question earlier, a piece that I was wanting to drive toward is our common tendency to say we've always done it that way. And Charlie Brown found out that doesn't necessarily get you where you need to go. Right. So appreciate you talking about, okay, how do we do research or look at something different? But I think what we learn when we measure and fail is that is learning, yes. And it then teaches us to take a different tact, which is awesome. Yeah,
fail forward, right. And I like to foster, and Torney, I know you're totally with me on this, is that failure is just an opportunity of improvement. So there's no failure, it's just all opportunity. How many people have heard Torney walk around and use that term? How many people have been told, hey, I have an opportunity for you, right? Patricia, Todd, I'm there too. So it is all about opportunity. So you learn from those mistakes, and that's great. They've, I've had some stories in the data center teams about people being really hard on themselves when their programs don't perform what they think they're, and we're like, are you kidding me? That is such a great lesson that you learn, right, Steve? We come across this all the time. So there is no failure; it's learning. The failure is if you don't act on it, right? That's the failure.
So I guess another thing I just wanted to point out is so many of our partners don't really ever measure the impact of what they do. So they're still really into outputs. And so they're patting themselves on the back for every single output that they achieve. So that may be also helpful for when we do evaluate for them to say that, you can't expect 100% success in meeting the mark every single time, but just think, at least now you're aware right. of where you want to get to. Anyway.
And then, Stacey, my question is, like Torney said, we've always done it this way, we've always done it this way. Where does change management come in coupling or working with this process to move people from A to B and get them thinking and open to trying new ideas?
Right. So I would, change management is, if you do any formal QI training, it's an essential part of it, because improvement is change at some level, right? Hopefully it's a change for the better. So it's integral. Change management is integral to all these concepts. There's no magic bullet, right? And I think the first thing that we can do as an organization, and I like to think we do this pretty well, is that we hold each other accountable, but we don't blame when things go wrong, right? It's a learning. So partly it's the culture that you operate in, and as managers, there's managers in this room What culture are you fostering on your team? Can people come to you with a mistake and can you help them learn from it, or is it penalizing them for poor performance? So there's no magic bullet. I mean, I would suggest that workforce development, maybe think about bringing on some trainings for change management. There are some approaches that you can do, and a lot of it all starts with communication, culture. Really great comments. Torney, this is... hang on just a second. You sent me some readings months ago that you thought might play into this, and they are, and I would encourage maybe some disseminating them. But so one of the documents, and I can't remember the title of it, but it's about when people have that resistance to change. It's not that people resist change, right? $1 million might change your life. Are you going to resist that if you won the lottery? So it's resisting change that's undesired or unwanted. So the first thing you can do is, if you feel yourself reacting, is just saying, how am I feeling threatened? What am I reflecting, inner reflecting, and thinking, what am I anxiety? Where is this anxiety coming from? What am I worried about? And kind of face that. And I think those are really good documents that people get afraid of change because it's threatening something in their world. Whether it's the stability of their income in their home, they think they're going to lose their job because we can make things more efficient and do better, than we'll be out of a job. Well, a principle of lean is that you then reprogram those staff to take on the new and harder tasks, not that you eliminate them, right? So change is good.
And I think another thing that threatens in all of us is our pride in how we've done work really well.
Right.
We know we've done work well with great pride. And then the unknown of, will I still have pride in this?
Right.
This is the thing. So as you say, there is different and perhaps more important work that we need your brain power
Right.
to be working.
Right. Torney?
A piece that I would add to that is that the work that we have done, however great it is, and most of it is great, I think most of us would recognize there are probably opportunities to make it better. And so it should never be taken as you're not doing good work. But by the same token, if the outcomes you have aren't the desirable outcomes, what you've been doing has gotten you to where you are. We have to change that if we're going to make it better. And I think that's always an opportunity. And I appreciate so much your comment earlier, Stacey, that this is not in any way about judging the individual. This is about judging our processes and our systems, where we each fulfill a role within that. How do we reevaluate those systems to improve what we can do to serve the public we're here to serve?
Yep. Great, good discussion. Any other? I thought I saw a hand in the back. No? Torch is like, no. Okay. Okay. So moving on, we're receptive to change. We've identified the need to change something. What are we going to do with those opportunities? We got to figure out the best way to approach it. So different opportunities will present you with a different challenge, a different methodology that you might want to use. What's the analogy we use for a method? Does anybody remember? A recipe. Method is to recipe. So it's a recipe. It's a series of steps you follow. I like linear steps I follow. When I don't know what I'm doing or I'm having a hard time feeling overwhelmed about a project, I bust out a method and say, okay, I just got to do this and then this and then this. And I calm down, right? So it just gives you some confidence that you're able to move forward in a systematic way. Not always black and white. So sometimes we think we know what we do, and then you get further down, and then you need to go back. So again, don't feel afraid to reiterate and go backwards in accomplishing your work. You need to define your project. We spent a lot of time in the first learning co-op last year talking about defining our project. How many people walked into that class and then walked out of it with a redefined project? Okay. I think we have a lot of new people in here. It happened a lot. There was a lot of people that came to the table that was like, oh my God, my biggest learning was I needed to change this project or the approach I was taking, which is great. So we're not going to go into this in detail, but I'm overlapping here intentionally with some of what we covered in the first learning co-op, just so you can see how they're related. This is a quality improvement, quality planning project definition. After you develop your objective goes right into the statement, and then you flesh out the rest of it, which is really your plan of attack and how you're going to address that improvement opportunity. That's next year's co-op.
And can you remind people where they find that document?
It should be, Patricia, help me out if I'm wrong.
What's that?
It should be on the SRHD website under...
Just talking about how the link is wrong on there.
Improvement opportunity.
I will send out the link.
We'll send you out the link.
Yeah.
But if you want to prepare yourself, if you're interested in going into next year's learning co-op, if we're going to be doing another QI cycle, get ahead of it. Put your SMART objective in there and let's get ready to rock it out next year, okay? So we'll send that form out. This is next year's focus. This document helps you think through what you're trying to accomplish and why. So I'm going to do a quick dive into the different methods. So depending on your project, there might be a lot of different approaches. So part of what we do with that project definition is figuring out what's the best approach for your opportunity. You might be fixing an existing service or process. If it's an existing process, series of steps that need to be fixed, that's process improvement or quality improvement. If you need to design a new process, or if one's so flippin' broke and you just need to recreate it, that's happened a lot, right? That's quality planning process. There's a method for that, a series of steps. Do I really have a problem with the process? That's just ongoing performance measurement. You might need to do some customer service assessment, quality control. What we've been teaching is an aspect of quality control, just monitoring your program performance over time with data. That's quality control. And again, same thing, monitoring your process. You're going to continue doing that always and forever. What about if I just need to put something into place? It's a decision. I don't need to analyze root cause. I already know what my customer's needs are. I don't need to analyze the voice of the customer, because that's just classic project management. And there's methods to do that. We typically teach a project management course in spring. If there's need for that, we'll redo it. What if I know that there's a problem, but I don't quite understand it? Assessment. You need further information. What if I really need to justify my results are working or why they're not? So the why and the how to do it better. Then we may need to have a conversation with the data center and do a full-blown program evaluation and or launch a research project working with some academic partners in the community. That might be your improvement finding and what you move forward on. You might find you need to create a brand new program development and evidence-based practice research. So the expectation is not that you know all these methods, but that you know there's a method to help you wherever you're at and to seek help for it, and we can work through it with you. Questions? Does anybody remember what a zombie project is from last year? I'm seeing a couple heads. What is it? Waste of time. Beware of zombie projects. I think there's several people that came in to the learning co-op last year with what we called zombie projects. Those projects you want to run away from screaming because if they touch you, they're going to turn you. Adverse professional experience, an APE, that's what I call them. Those are projects that have no leadership support. If you just have this, you're on your pulpit and you're like, this has got to change, this has got to change, and you're the only one that thinks that, how much traction are you going to get? None. So don't pick projects that nobody else cares about. If it's undefined and so flippin' vague that nobody understands what you're trying to do and you don't even, that's a zombie project. You need to think through it before you try to get people to help you with it. Scope, scope, scope. I'm a big advocate for limiting scope. So those things that are monstrous, too large of a scope, they don't set you up for success. You can't be successful if it's unscoped. Trying to save the world all at once. Typical public health. Too big. No clear goal or objective. Has anybody had zombie projects? Yeah. Are you successful with them? No. Do you learn a lot with them? I mean, that's not. All right. And then remember that not everything needs to be a project. Like sometimes you just need to tie your shoelaces when it's undone. You don't need to analyze the problem, right? So non-project criteria, these are just do-its. Low risk, low cost, easy to do. You don't need to study it. Chances are it's not going to have some unforeseen consequences. It's broadly supported. Just implement it. Just tie the shoe. So again, here's just a recap of the different methods you have at your disposal through the data center. Last year's co-op or this year's co-op is focusing on program eval light, which is what we call it, which is just monitoring the pulse of your program with data. Last year, we were focusing on designing processes or improving existing processes. These are all the other opportunities for training. We just need to hear what people are interested in learning, and we can set it up moving forward, whether or not it's me and Julie or somebody else. And then remember, improvement in the big sense of the word. All of these methods and tools are about improvement. FAB is about improvement. It's all about improvement in the big umbrella sense. But just be mindful that sometimes people like me will say quality improvement and mean something very specific. So I'm just throwing that out there just to be mindful of, again, the jargon that we use. So quality improvement is something very specific to QIGs. Not all quality improvement projects need to be tied directly to your performance results. If you need to improve those headline measures because they represent some important programming, focus there. But if you're doing good, you can look at those other opportunities. And sometimes you need to address those pain points, things that are just driving you nuts in your program, things that you know are broken. You don't have any specific data for it, but part of it could be getting the data to understand it. So not everything has to be a QI project either. Questions, comments? Okay. So a big question I get with quality improvement is people ask, well, when am I done? When can I be done? What's the answer to that?
Never done.
Never. When you die. Tori said when you die. Okay. It might not be that extreme, and maybe there is a done point. There's never a done with the method, but you don't necessarily have to keep improving something that's already performing really well. But you just have to keep trying. And I think I've seen people last year in the co-op that they've tried to do an improvement project and they didn't see their results. So you can get frustrated and say we're not going to have a chance at winning or improving, or you can keep going. I think does anybody ever think about the really big public health issues that we're facing? Or maybe it's just me and I freak myself out. But thinking about child abuse, violence in the community, obesity, these big, huge issues. And sometimes you can let yourself get really down when you think about, what can I possibly do? What impact am I going to have? And it can get frustrating, and you can kind of get overwhelmed and lost in the big cause of public health. But perseverance, because if you guys aren't doing your job, who else is going to be doing it? It's like we're here in this workforce for a reason, and it's generally because we love what we do. I don't know anybody in public health that says, I'm here because it's a paycheck and I hate this work. I've never heard that in all my 10 years of talking to people about public health. I've just never heard it.
So really, let's do a quick check-in and make sure that everybody understands. Are you understanding how the program performance is going to link into the continuous quality improvement? Is that making sense? Okay. So now we're going to go full circle. And we started off in the first session talking about FAB, Public Health Improvement Board, and we talked about the standards. And so now we're going to go all the way back there. And Stacey mentioned the story report. So we're going to be going through that. You can pull that out of your packets. So 2 objectives. One objective is to make sure that when I'm done that you can understand really how filling this out or doing something different, we'll give you some alternatives, is going to meet the standards around program performance monitoring. And then my second objective really with Stacey is to convince all of the accreditation team members that this is going to work. So that's our second objective. So I'm going to start here for just a minute. Remember that we're talking about Domain 9. The standards, the public health standards, are divided into chapters or domains. Domain 9 is all about evaluation and continuously improving. And we're specifically addressing Standard 9.1, which is performance management. And so we're wanting to make sure that we can meet all of those things that we're measured against for that. So what I've got here is a chart. We're going to be going through this, and the left-hand column is the particular measure from FAB, and then we'll be going through the middle column and then the right-hand column separately. So the first thing to point out is that throughout the co-op, we've been giving you lots of different tools, and I've got those just pictured at the bottom. We've had worksheets, we've got the story report that I'll be going through, the data collection plan, we've been giving you tools to develop your SMART objectives. Stacey talked about the project definition form. So all those are tools to help do the evaluation and then to help also document for the standards. Couple of little, I guess, disclaimers. When we're talking, when we're giving you the workshops, that's really a tool to help you through, or excuse me, the worksheets. That's a tool to help you through the process, but not necessarily something that you would turn into FAB to document. So the one that we just filled out on the SMART objectives, that's how you're just working through and figuring out what your SMART objective is, but that's not really a documentation piece that you would turn in. So a little bit different on the worksheets versus some of these other materials. Good? Okay. So we've got for 9.1.3A, and A just means all, everybody has to do it. Number 2, that's what we worked out, where we worked out our program goal. And we've got the story report I'll go through with you. And then session 3, the worksheet was also, we've got the worksheet there for the objectives. Actually, it was session 2 where we did the objectives last time because we missed 2 for the windstorm. Then we've got 913A, number 3, that's monitoring performance. So that's all about the data collection plan, collecting all that. Again, I'll show you with the story report. 913A4, analyzing. And so a lot of that is, those are the charts, and also going kind of meshing into the other co-op where we're talking about using some other tools to, like fishbone diagram, doing cause and effect. So those are kind of linking into the other co-op. And then last one, 5, reporting out the results and your improvement opportunities. So that's the project definition form, and again, this story report. So I know that that's a little bit confusing, but we're going to be real specific now. So let's look at this. Let's look at the story report. The first thing that we have to show for FAB is that we've got our written goals and our written objectives. And the objective has to indicate when we're going to be doing the measuring. So time frame, time bound, right? So those are the SMART objectives that we just learned how to do. So in the very top corner, it says that your program contributes to the following end result. Well, that's where we're asking you to put your goal statement. So that's the very end, the end result, the goal statement that we worked on in the first session. And then the SMART objectives, they go into the center portion. And you're going to list your SMART objective, and then also there's room for some data, a graph or a chart or whatever. We'll get to that in a minute. And you have the ability to, after you list your SMART objective, to explain the data and whether or not you met your target or objective. So that's where that would go. We also have to show that we're monitoring our performance against those goals and objectives. So in that center portion again, where we've just listed our SMART objective, well then we're putting our data in there. So that's showing that we're monitoring it. We're just dumping a graph in or dumping a chart in. We also have to show that we're analyzing and identifying areas that need to be improved. And so this is where, for standards team, this is where I think we may need to show our work. And so what we've got here, we've got a couple of places. We've got the story behind the performance, where we have the ability to describe the tools and the techniques that we use to analyze our results. For example, did you discuss these results in a program meeting? Then did you go through brainstorming, or did you go through root cause analysis to figure out why you got the results and what had impacted your results? So you have room there to talk about the story behind your performance. And then in the bottom, that's the appendices. And so that's where we want this to be one-stop shopping. FAB also wants you to show your work, and so it doesn't mean you're throwing away everything else that you did. So if you've got other tools that you're using, that's where you want to list them there, because if we're having to refer to them later, or if your stakeholders want to look at them, or if we need to turn those in for FAB, then you've got those listed there for your reference, what tools you used and how you went through figuring things out. You can go back and take a look at those later. We also have to show that we document and report results of the analysis and opportunities for improvement and the next steps. Okay, so we've done that, and this is the documentation piece, but there's that reporting piece. What if you just write this down and nobody looks at it? Well, FAB is going to ask us, well, did we tell our stakeholders? Who do we report this to? So in the upper right-hand section, we have a place where not only do you identify your stakeholders, but then you would go ahead and list or identify how you reported to them. So for example, one of our stakeholders in our school program would be our school advisory committee. And what we do at the end of each year, after we look at our information and our data, then we report out those findings to those stakeholders. So I would list then the stakeholders, and then I would say, reported out in a January 15th, 2016 meeting to our stakeholders, so that FAB is seeing that we are working with our stakeholders that way. Yes, Natalie.
Do you need to have supporting documentation, meeting notes or agenda or anything else for accreditation?
For the reporting out piece, that's the one place where FAB does not specify what specific document that you have to have. However, yes, supporting documentation is always helpful. Because when we turn in information to FAB and then they come and do the site visit, sometimes they're looking and it's maybe not syncing with them, or maybe we haven't explained it well, and so they're asking us for more information or more documentation. And so you've heard the saying, if you don't document it, then you didn't do it. So yeah, you do want to have documentation. And it can be really simple in meeting minutes or sometimes our emails. We have to email certain information back to the Department of Health. And so we keep copies of the emails. It doesn't have to be anything real elaborate. Does that answer for you?
It does. And then if this is to be like a standalone form, would there be like links to these documents on SharePoint, or would there be just a file, electronic file folder? I know I'm driving Lisa crazy, but I'm just trying to think of if it's supposed to be like one document, one go-to.
I can see a couple of ways to do it. And actually, because we're going to have the report out in March, you folks are all going to have the opportunity to help us pilot this and then figure out what's working, what's not working with it. But I could see, again, for our school program, what we would do on our SharePoint team site, we would put all of our documents, and then we would just link this to our documents on our team site. That's how I would see that we would do it. But lots of ways to do that. Other questions? Does that make sense then? Do you understand how to put the different components in to those fields based on what we've gone through these past several sessions? Okay. Standards team, think that's going to work?
I'm going to take a look at it and compare it to some files that they give us for the annual report and see if there's any tweaks. But
Okay, so Patricia has to, one of her tasks is communicating with FAB and coming up with our annual report information. And so she just said she's going to go back and look and make sure that this is going to do it. And Stacey and I have both been through it, so hopefully we'll get a third concurrence with it. All right, but what if you don't want to use this, or what if you already have something else in place? Is what you have in place going to be sufficient to meet those same measures from FAB? Well, I'll give you another example from our water recreation program, and the short answer is yes, if your documentation contains all of the components that FAB is asking for. So, for example, in our water recreation program, we have a planning calendar. We also have, so that says, in this time frame, we're going to do this many inspections. We also have regulations which require certain things and procedures which require certain numbers within certain time frames. And then we also have a logic model. So within those documents, we've got our goal and we've got our SMART objectives. We're monitoring our performance because we have to annually send some data to Department of Health. We also are doing audits. We're pulling our inspection logs. We're pulling violation data. And we're dumping those into our logic model data collection, which is similar to Stacey's data collection sheet that she handed out. Looks a little bit different, but we're monitoring and documenting it there in those formats. We're analyzing it because we're looking at our logic model data collection. We're doing that in a program meeting. And we're going through and looking at our lessons learned. We're going through cause and effect. We're asking why did this happen? And then, so we're going through the cause and effect. We're coming up with fishbone diagrams. We've got it written down in our meeting minutes, just kind of like Natalie mentioned, so that we document that we did it. And then if there are opportunities that we identify where we need to improve, we're also putting those in a project definition form because we're moving forward with a project. And then for reporting out, again, that logic model data collection piece would be okay, plus, again, the information that we send to Department of Health in emails and in our meeting minutes. All that we've got documented that we're sharing that with our stakeholders and community partners. So there are different ways to meet the measures. Make sense? Okay. Stacey's got one additional template that you want to go. Do you want to go through, or just mention that this is another? Well, do you want to send this template out?
I can send it out or review it. What people want to do.
So Stacey, it's hard to see really on the big screen, but I mean, is this really just for a data collection, and what all is this going to mean?
This is just an alternate template. If the logic model data collection is hard for you, you still have to show that you're tracking data. But this is a template that brings your program goals, objectives, measurements together with your activities. So it's almost like a modified just work plan. The work plan really is just meant to line out specific tasks and assignments and responsibilities and the dates. This kind of combines those into one. So I know lots of people have work plans and they're just missing the measurement piece, so you can bring them together, and this is just an example. And at the end of it, at the beginning of it, there's some definitions, and at the end of it, there's a programmatic example in there that you can look at. So we can send it out, and we're just trying to give you, not all tools work for everybody. People's minds think differently, so just find something that works for you and your program.
Questions? Does anybody use anything else, any other formats to meet all this that maybe you'd like to share, or that maybe you have questions about? Does this seem easier than crawling 100 yards with 160 pounds? Does it seem doable? Okay. Which leads us into next year, really, which leads us into the share out portion of this co-op, but we'll have it the first quarter, probably March. So everybody has an opportunity to finish their worksheets, compile their data. And again, we're asking that you would test this program story report so that we see, is it usable for folks? Does it make sense? Things that we need to change. And then we'll do a share out. And the share outs, we had the share out last time. It was fun. We had prizes. What else? Who was here?
People really enjoyed it.
Yeah, people enjoyed it. And I'm going to link to the strategic plan now, because one of the things that people have requested in the agency is the ability to hear what others are doing and to share ideas and communicate. And what we found from the share out is that it really does accomplish all of that. So we'll send out a meeting reminder as we get closer?
So we would really like everybody that participated to work on that, knowing that you may not be able to complete a complete program storyboard because, say, if you just started data collection, you're not going to have your results ready. So it's really presenting where you're at, right? So it's okay. But I would encourage everybody, so tying into strategic planning and as we look at how to look at performance across the agency, encouraging everybody to identify their 3 headline measures and come, even if you don't have the data currently, come prepared to report on what those are. Because we're going to be talking in our strategic planning goal group, performance management system, how we might use that data to like create an agency dashboard.
Yeah, and I'm going to be really interested to see how you fill out the form around the SMART objectives and the measures, because it's really made so that you may have one SMART objective, and I mean maybe you haven't split. Maybe you're measuring a couple of things, haven't split it. So I'm just going to be really interested to see how many activities you're putting on there, because certainly that one page isn't going to showcase your whole entire program. But again, we're just looking at kind of the highlight measures.